Good evening, one and all. It's 5:30 on a Friday, which means it is time for our Friday night preview show. Norwich City hosting Sheffield Wednesday at Carrow Road tomorrow with fans, which we'll come on to in a little while. I'm Connor Southwell, joined by Paddy Davitt. Pad, I feel like we should just dive straight in and talk about the thing that people are going to want to know, which is injuries. And for the last few weeks, while we've been sat here sort of going and trawling through every injury and how long they're out for and how negative it is, finally a little bit of good news to talk about.
Well, I thought when you said the thing everybody wanted to talk about, it was going to be hugging referees, but obviously not. We're going to get into that.
We'll come on to that.
Okay, good. Yeah, no. Well, I mean, to be accurate, it's a good week. It's been a good 2 bulletins now, 2 pre-matches, because obviously prior to the Luton game was when as Daniel said, you started to see some light at the end of the tunnel in terms of injuries. Nothing really, bar Emi Buendia coming back from suspension, that helped him at Kenilworth Road, sadly. But as the game panned out, they could have done with a few more of the senior boys. But for tomorrow, the main man is back, and that is very, very good news. Teemu Pukki. We spoke to Daniel just prior to their final training session, so there is a slight caveat that if he got any issue in that final training session Friday afternoon, then not. But they were pretty confident. He was pretty confident, Daniel, that the GOAT will be back, and you would expect he'll be back leading the line because, in the last 2 games when he's been absent with his hamstring issue, it's been Stiepermann and then even Poeta got to go midweek, and neither of them really have the authority or the class or the goal-scoring instincts of the main man. So, if tomorrow it's the Luton collective plus Teemu Pukki, then that's a good step forward. And then moving forward, beyond this game on Sunday, they'll be training, and Daniel's expectation / hope is that Jordan Hugill, Todd Cantwell and Kieran Dowell will all be training on Sunday, or at least doing part of the training session. So once we get beyond this weekend, Forest next midweek, probably too early for certainly Dowell, I would think, possibly too early for Cantwell. But Hugill, if he could be an option then on the bench for Forest, then it starts to feel a bit more like, they're through the worst of it. No more injuries, obviously, but then they can really attack it again, whereas probably for the last 2 or 3 games, even though up until Luton they were still grinding out results, it's felt a little bit like a holding pattern. They've just trying to get through, trying to sort of grind out results. But ultimately, and of course the man I've not mentioned as well, Tim Krul, he won't be too much further away beyond next week. So, if we get to the Christmas period and the majority of the key players are back, yes, we know there's 3 or 4 lads still looking at January onwards for comebacks, but certainly Krul, certainly Pukki, those 2 back in the 11, I think significantly improves Norwich as a defensive unit and an attacking unit, and that was graphically illustrated at Luton for me. They were found wanting in both areas of the pitch, and I just think you drop those 2 players in, different game entirely. And can you imagine tomorrow Emi Buendia linking with Teemu Pukki again? Totally different dimension. So, really positive news again today, and we just hope now that, Lord knows, they deserve a fair win. From now on, it's less about injuries and more about how good are these players.
Yeah, I really hope so. As you mentioned there, Emi Buendia, although he limped off on Wednesday evening, that's just cramp, so he will be back for tomorrow. And then the good news that you outlined there, Jordan Hugill, Todd Cantwell and Kieran Dowell all returning to team training on Sunday, which is a massive boost, although they'll probably be reintegrated at different times, as Daniel said today, because Jordan Hugill has played more football in the last 3 weeks than, say, Kieran Dowell has, who's been out for significantly longer, so he's going to need a longer period to be bedded in. I'll say at this point, any comments, questions, do get them in, whether you're watching on Facebook, Twitter or YouTube. There should be a little comment box. Stick them in there. We'll try and answer as many as we can across the show. I can already see a few guys, even to Phil Brooks, to Matt Gregory, to the Dubai Canary, to Edward as well. Dan Mayhew, wow, good news for Kieran Dowell. Impressive. It certainly is. Norwich have had sort of cases where they have been able to bring back those injured players a little bit early. Hopefully he's one of them. It would be a major boost. Paddy, just very quickly, Xavi Quintilla, where are Norwich City at with him? Because last we heard he was back in Spain getting some treatment. So where in terms of time frame and sort of schedule, where are we with Xavi Quintilla?
Well, basically, he's obviously, I've seen a few bits on his social media platform as well. He's doing some pool work I saw there in the swimming pool the last day or two, and think there was another post about back soon. So he clearly feels it positive about his prospects of coming back sooner rather than later. Just to recap, hip flexor issue, pulled out the warm-up at Brentford, which is getting on for about 8 games, I think now 9 games. Albeit he had that issue prior to. It wasn't just something that went in the warm-up at Brentford. But frustratingly, Daniel initially, after the game at Brentford, felt it wouldn't be certainly the length of time it has been. And reading between the lines, City's medical staff, City's physio team haven't quite been able to get to the bottom of it. So send him back to Villarreal. Clearly, he's working there with doctors and physios who've worked for him for a lot longer, know his body a lot better probably. And it does seem from afar that things might be moving in a positive direction. In terms of timescale, well, there's 2 things in play. There's obviously recovering from the injury, but also, as Daniel alluded to again today, coming back into the UK from Spain, he would have to undergo a period of quarantine. Would have to, I think he said, 2 negative coronavirus tests as well. So all that leads you to think probably unrealistic to think in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So maybe he's another one you would optimistically hope will be back in the fold before they hit the Christmas period. And it needs to happen because, Jakob Sorensen has done a passable impression, but every game for me now, you see elements of he's not a left-back. He's not a left-back by trade. He's filling in. He's a square peg in a round hole. And it's commendable that he's got the attitude to do that. And he's done a solid enough job, but I think both defensively and more so attacking-wise, he's not offering what Quintilla would offer going forward. And that, in the wider context, is so important to Daniel Farke and how he sets his teams up. The 2 wider fullbacks offer an attacking threat, get Norwich up the pitch, inject that width when it's, in theory, it can get a bit central with Pukki and Buendia in the middle of the park. And Norwich have been deprived that, really, because Sorensen doesn't offer that in terms of an attacking outlet. And you go back to the defensive side. He was the one who was the closest, but not close enough to the boy Pearson midweek. The second goal Luton scored, that ball swung in from the wide area, free kick, and he rises in front of Sorensen. So yeah, massively important moving forward that Quintilla is available. And if he isn't, go back to probably this one we did last Friday, where when I asked Daniel, well, does that necessitate they might have to look in a different direction in terms of January with the window around the corner? Daniel rightly said, well, there's a lot of games between now and then. There's also a block of time for Javi Quintilla to get himself fit. But if you want to be hypothetical about it, if we get to the Christmas period, Javi Quintilla still isn't available, I think they're going to have to go and do something in January, because they cannot continue with Jakob Sorensen as your first choice left back. They're getting found out now, and it only has to be one incident like Luton in a game. But if it costs a goal, ultimately it's detrimental to where Norwich are trying to get to this season. So Daniel knows that. Stuart Webber knows that. This cannot continue. It is what it is for now. But hopefully, as I say, the signs coming out of Spain in terms of his own media, social media, and what Daniel said again today, possibly they feel they might have got to the bottom of whatever the issue was with his hip flexor. And now we wait, but it needs to happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it certainly does. And Daniel added that it may be a while yet, because he has to obviously come back to Norwich, return some negative coronavirus tests. Then he has to self-isolate, complete his rehab before coming back as well. So still a little bit of a way off, but certainly it seems like there's some light at the end of that particular tunnel right now. Right then, Paddy, it seems weird that we're going to talk about hugging given the current situation, but
not me and you, Connor. Not me and you, hopefully.
No, absolutely not in the current climate. No, you wouldn't find us doing that. But obviously on Wednesday evening, and it sort of come out subsequently, there was a Sky Sports report last night that Norwich had complained to the FL about the incident involving Luke Berry, where, I've seen the footage back, and he seems to, it is, isn't it? Yeah, he essentially puts both arms around the referee, Darren England, after he's awarded a penalty. From what I understand, that's formed part of a complaint that Norwich City have made to the FL about the match officials on the night. They feel that they were treated with disrespect, both the backroom staff and the players, with how they were spoken to. What do you make of this? Because it's quite rare that we hear of a complaint of this nature. Usually it's clubs getting sanctioned for comments post-match about referees, not necessarily clubs going to the FL complaining about referees. What's your take on it? Yeah,
no, it's very unusual, and it probably underlines the disappointment, if we want to be diplomatic, that Norwich felt, both on the night, because what subsequently happened is not counter to what Daniel's assessment was immediately after the game. he was very unhappy with the official, Darren England, the man in the middle. Reeled off 3 or 4 what he felt were key incidents, and they were, because they obviously led indirectly or directly to goals, and felt Norwich didn't get what he felt was the rub of the green. And as he said, it was a very calm conversation he had on the night with the official. He had one view, the referee clearly had a different view, but then subsequently to hear about terms about disrespect shown to the Norwich personnel, and then compounded by that picture, which is it's astonishing, really, to see that. I was there at the game. I didn't see it in real time. I was more trying to get my head around how he could award a penalty, because in real time, and nothing I've seen subsequently has altered my original view. How he gives a penalty against Grant Hanley is phenomenal. It's an inept display from me that night from the official, and capped by okay, he's not hit. If you want to split hairs, it's not him hugging Luke Berry. He hasn't gone arms outstretched. It's more the Luton player, but in the context of a very, very poor refereeing display, even trying to be impartial about it and not look at it through Norwich tinted spectacles, it doesn't downplay the sense that Norwich probably felt they were on the wrong end of all the key decisions, and it's a bad look. It's a bad look for Luton, bad look for that player. It's not a great look for the referee, and I'll be interested now where the EFL go with that. I haven't actually checked where his assignment is for this coming weekend. If anybody's able to find it out, it'd be interesting to know on this broadcast, because it wouldn't be surprising, would it, if they didn't make too much in terms of public statements, but he found himself, in most people's eyes, maybe demoted in terms of his next refereeing appointment, because any assessor who was there at that game that night cannot be overly impressed with his display, I didn't think. And that's even before you get into, which we wouldn't have known about because we're not close enough to the action. But if Norwich clearly felt there was a disrespect shown to Daniel, his coaches, even the players, how the players were addressed. I mean, those are things you very rarely would, and certainly even more rare is that a professional club would feel compelled to actually contact the EFL voicing those concerns. So not a good look, not a good look at all. Whether anything tangible will come of it, probably not, but at least Norwich have raised their concerns. And that was Daniel's point today. He wasn't questioning the impartiality of Darren England, the referee. He said he'd be very happy if he was the official for tomorrow's game. And he feels he's a good referee. But just on that night, for whatever reason, they didn't see eye to eye, I think it's safe to say. And it probably does take a little bit off Luton's win, which was merited. Let's be honest, I don't think Daniel was using that or looking to hide behind excuses that they lost the game because of the referee. They lost the game because they wasn't good enough, either in the defensive side of the game or what they offered going forward. So, but ultimately, it does leave a sour taste, I would imagine, from the Norwich end, and clearly it does, because it is quite an unprecedented step. But as I say, I don't expect anything will tangibly happen. But I would be interested to see where Mr. England goes next.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I did want to ask you, because you mentioned you were there. Obviously, I watched the game from home on Wednesday. One point that was made to me was that they weren't happy that the linesman had missed an offside call, a fairly routine offside call, because he was having a we'll use the word discussion. I'm sure you can use other words, but having a discussion with Daniel Farke, maybe. Is that something that you saw on the night? Because I feel like the complaint that has been made isn't necessarily against Darren England, but is against the match officials as a team.
Yeah, no, I don't remember the specific incident. It's not a great sightline, the media box, relative to where you view the action. It's quite an old main stand there, and they've got these huge pylons which is sort of peering through a lot of the time to see the action on the pitch. Poor me, I can feel the sympathy washing over us from the audience. But in terms of I didn't see a specific incident. Daniel didn't reference it after the game. What he did reference, and we might broaden it out a little bit, is in terms of the impact of the crowd and whether, albeit there was only 1,000 in there, but they did make a right din. That was their first fans inside the stadium, because they didn't have the test event that Norwich had back in September. That was their first crowd, if you want to label it that, since March, I think. And the ones who were lucky enough to be there really did make their voices heard. And Daniel talked about whether that, subliminally influenced the ref. Not again, just to reiterate, questioning his impartiality, but the fact that, he's been refereeing games for many a months with no supporters in, and then every decision that was perceived to be against Luton and for Norwich was getting the treatment. And Daniel, I think, actually said after the game that when he listed 3 or 4 of the key decisions, the one that led to the second Luton goal, which was the free kick award, right over in the left-hand corner, Norwich's left-back position. I think Daniel Tartley observed that was like 11 fans in that part of the stadium who had made their feelings known, and maybe he'd been swayed by that. So, no, didn't see the offside call. But if that is true, then that's a shocking indictment. What on earth is the official's job, the assistants anyway, but to be looking at the action and get those offside calls correct? So if he was distracted by having discourse with Norwich's backroom team, then it reflects very poorly on him. But I think it was more the whole episode rather than, I mean, we haven't obviously seen the documentation that's gone to the AFL, so we don't know the actual nuanced specifics, but it's probably safe to say that it wasn't one isolated incident talking about the offside decision. I'm sure there was quite a procession of what Norwich felt were issues which collectively added up to a blow-par display from the officials. Yeah,
there's some nice photos that our photographer Paul Cheston got on the night of Daniel Farke looking down the line. Sort of looks like he's shouting at the official, certainly in conversation with the linesman, which is quite interesting. I'm going to bring in a comment from Matthew Johnson on Facebook. He said, "Are we desperate to cling on to this referee nonsense? We didn't. There you go, covering our faces, which is probably a positive. We didn't lose because of the ref. We lost because we didn't play well enough or create enough on the night. And our makeshift team, who's been doing their best, came unstuck. In the Premier League, we moan about VAR being too accurate. Now in the Championship, we moan because the ref isn't accurate enough, making us look rather laughable and won't change a thing. The game's done." Well, I think the obviously the incident with Luke Berry was seen afterwards, but the point that Norwich City would make is that it's not necessarily the decisions that have gone against them they're complaining about. It's more the language and the disrespect they feel they were shown by the officials on the night.
Yeah, no, I mean, I made that point before we pushed up that comment, and Daniel, I'd have to go back and listen to his full post-match interview, but I'm pretty sure before he got into anything about referees, he got into his side's defensive deficiencies. So there's certainly nobody inside the Norwich camp who would for one iota try and claim that they got beat because the referee and the assistants weren't good enough. Absolutely not. But I think it is fair to point out that, you know, even to the most neutral observer, there was some very questionable officiating on that evening. And but yeah, it sounds separate to any he got that right, he got that penalty wrong award. I don't think a letter or a correspondence would have been fired off from Norwich to the EFL if they felt he'd got a penalty call wrong or an offside wrong for that matter. They clearly feel there was an underlying subtext to the way that the officials carried themselves. In Norwich's view, the officials clearly, if they had a right to reply, they would possibly come back with a different take on what went on the other night. But ultimately, Norwich believe that there was disrespect shown. So, as Daniel said, you know, you see pictures of players hugging referees. That isn't normal by any manner of means. I think they're in their rights to at least flag that up. But as I said, to repeat myself, it won't change the result. They've still got beat 3-1. They still didn't get any points. It's still the end of their 10-game unbeaten run. So, yeah, maybe we should move on. But certainly, I don't think any fan, whatever your affiliation, really can look at a picture of a player hugging a referee when he awards a team a penalty and think that is normal behaviour. So I think Norwich are in their rights to flag that up, along with, as I say, we're not party to it, but if they feel there was disrespect shown, then clearly that shouldn't be allowed either. In the same way that, you know, players shouldn't disrespect officials. It works both ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, and from the way I was told, I think they probably would have made the same complaint even if they'd have turned out to win the game or even have got a draw. Simon Drain on YouTube has answered your question about where Darren England is tomorrow. Turns out he's at the Den, so that's going to be an interesting one. Obviously, there will be fans inside there, so I wish in Derby good luck tomorrow. And in that case, and Simon makes the point that he did referee Norwich's game against Swansea a few weeks ago. Let's hear from City boss Daniel Farke on the incident. He was quite diplomatic, but here's what he had to say earlier today.
I wouldn't be concerned if he would be in charge for tomorrow. If then some of our key people in the club, after such a game where all key decisions were a bit against us, and especially in this situation, I think it was also no question mark that the penalty decision was a wrong decision, because there was a foul before on my club captain Grant Henley. I think there's no discussion about this. And if then our key people seem a bit celebrating with the players of the ball, that he lets himself being celebrated by the players of the opponent with a hug or something like this. I think then it's also fair that they ask some question. That's what they have to do in the interests of the club. That's quite normal. But again, so I'm far away from interpreting anything in it or read something bad in it. So no problem at all. I have no problem at all with our referee. So good relationship with Darren. We had a different opinion about a few situations. We spoke about this, but that's it for me. But I think it's also, that's what our key people then perhaps have to do in the interest of the club, to ask some questions. But again, so not a topic further on for me, and not a problem for me.
There you go. Daniel Farker, on the complaint made, sort of distanced himself from it a little bit, and he said it was the key people perhaps rather than him, which is quite interesting. We'll see if there is a response from the EFL. Not that we're particularly anticipating one, but it certainly will be interesting to see what the ramifications of that complaint are. Let's speak about something a lot more positive, which is the fact that 2,000 Norwich City fans are going to be back inside Carrow Road tomorrow. I know I'm looking forward to the drive up to Carrow Road and seeing I think given it's snow today, it'll probably be yellow scarves rather than yellow shirts. But just to have that pre-match excitement is going to be good. Daniel spoke today about the impact he felt the 1,000 fans had at Luton. He kind of implored Norwich fans to have the same effect tomorrow, and we've got a nice bit with Ben Kensel on our website today about how singing is permitted, so it's worth saying that first and foremost. But just how much of an impact do you think that's going to have, 2,000 fans inside Carrow Road? Will it bring back some sort of home advantage for Norwich?
Well, you draw a parallel with the Preston game. That finished 2-2, and Preston were a better side for long spells. But ultimately, Norwich found a way and went right to the wire. I think they scored last 5 minutes that day. And there's no doubt about it. That 1,000 fans in the South Stand back in September were making a right racket. Felt a lot more than 1,000. Daniel referenced that after the game. I remember distinctly he was almost taken aback by the decibel levels. And it was. And that's probably a reaction to the preceding, however many months it was, 6 months without any fans in stadiums. And nobody really wants to continue with that for any length of time, and the contrast you could see again midweek. Luton, 1,000 in the stadium. You think, well, that's not very on air. It's a sort of crowd you might get for, I don't know, local cup tie or whatever, county cup final or whatever. But trust me, they made lots of noise, and you would hope that 2,000 at Carrow Road tomorrow, as Daniel said today, he was very good. He said the players have a responsibility when they wear the yellow shirt, but also those 2,000 tomorrow, lucky enough to be at Carrow Road, they have a responsibility because they have to make noise for the ones who aren't there, who have decided right now maybe it's not for them to come back to Carrow Road. So, yeah, huge onus on them. And I think it will help the players, absolutely no doubt about it. Help Luton players midweek. You saw when they scored the goals, they were off celebrating with the fans, something they've not been able to do. And as Daniel said today, particularly given they're in the midst of this injury-depleted crisis, if they are finding it tough in certain phases of the game tomorrow, they will get a lift from 2,000 vocal fans. So, you can debate whether the referee will be influenced, but we don't need to go into that again. But certainly, I think it will have a positive, uplifting presence on the Norwich players, and that's what it's about, home advantage. If it gives them any infinitesimally small factor in their favour, then that could ultimately tip the balance, because it's shaping like it's going to be a very tight game tomorrow anyway. Tony Pulis has gone in there. Sheffield Wednesday, they've drawn the first 3 games, not conceded more than 1 goal in any of the 3 games. They're basically, I think I'm right in saying, they've had a man sent off in majority, if not all of those 3 games, and yet still managed to be unbeaten. So we all know what's in store tomorrow in terms of the opponent. And if it is a tight game, what a difference to get into don't go down the stretch and you've got, a vocal minority, but still a vocal presence at Carrow Road driving those players on. I can't wait, because that Preston experience was, it was obviously nicer weather. You would think it was nice and sunny that day back in September and nice and warm, but just the energy around the stadium, it was obviously very well controlled, and those 1,000 fans had, I think, arrive at staggered times, and there was certain protocols in terms of the stages of access to get into the stadium. So it isn't, still the normal matchday experience, but it was transformational from what we've fortunate to experience, but still nonetheless going to a pretty soulless, empty stadium and, then watching, two sets of players trying to sort of raise themselves. And, it will be interesting, what impact it has in terms of the players' performance levels. I think, the product, and Daniel's touched on this, I don't think the product has been particularly good. And that is obviously to do with a lot of things. It's probably the concertina nature of the season, trying to cram more games in the Championship and the Premier League into an abbreviated period of time, all the injuries. None of that is helping. But I think ultimately the biggest factor is that fans haven't been in because, the fans provide the energy and the electricity inside the stadium. So, let's just hope this is the start of now a continued gradual incline in terms of fans being allowed back in, and that we don't get to early part of January and with the release for 4 or 5 days over Christmas in terms of people and movement around the country, that we end up back in a lockdown scenario, and obviously in the footballing context, no fans inside the stadium. Let's just hope this is the start, as Daniel says, the first step on the road to normality, and that moving into the new year, 2,000, 4,000, 8,000. I think in that article you referenced, Connor, on our website, I think we've spoken to the operations manager as well, and he said they've got plans ready to go. Norwich, this is for 4,000 fans, for 8,000 fans. If in time they can open up the upper tiers in the Barclay and the River End, those plans are in place. So all they're waiting on really is the green light from government and public health bodies. And let's hope, as I say, tomorrow, the first step along the road to that journey.
Yeah, let's know if you're going to Carrow Road tomorrow and how you feel about it. And as Paddy says there's a really important point that if you are going, you have to follow the rules, because any sort of sniff and any opportunity to go back to behind closed doors, it feels like will be taken in the next coming months. So behaviour is paramount. Let's move away from fans and sort of address some of the questions we've had. Craig Brown has said chance for fans to use fan power tomorrow to carry the team and be the 12th man. Need to try and encourage Michael McGovern to help his confidence. Matt Gregory on YouTube has said, after McGovern's shaky performance on Wednesday, can you or Paddy play? I certainly can't play in goal. I certainly can't. I can't speak for Paddy, but it wouldn't be pretty if I played in goal.
I was going to say something which would have been derogatory to Michael McGovern about my ability with the ball at my feet, but we won't go there, even though I've already expressed it now in a different manner. But no, Mickey McGovern's the man. Let's get behind him. Yeah, and he's got a tough ask, because he's replacing the irreplaceable in Tim Krul in terms of Norwich's current available keeping stocks. And he knows, as we all do, that he's basically in until and when Tim Krul is fit and available, and then he's out again. So, it's a difficult scenario for him. He didn't cover himself in glory, I didn't think, the other night, certainly with a ball at his feet. And you just hope tomorrow that, it passes without incident, and we're not really talking about a Michael McGovern error, because that would be a shame for the lad, and probably pretty costly for Norwich as well.
Yeah, so someone's asked if Michael McGovern is really 6'2". He certainly doesn't look 6'2". So we'll have to try and find him tomorrow and get a measuring tape out. Maybe we'll see. We've had an interesting question on YouTube from Alex, who said, what are the club's feeling on Daniel Barden? Is he better with his feet than Michael McGovern? A lot of rhythm seems to be lost when it's played back to McGovern. Is it worth sacrificing shot stopping for? Paddy, you saw Dan Barden play against Luton in the League Cup in the first game of the season. What do you make of him, and how would you compare him to Michael McGovern as a goalkeeper?
Well, I mean, height-wise, he seems to be a bit taller than Michael McGovern, so straight away there, I don't know exactly how tall he is, but physically, that's what I recalled that day, that it wasn't a callow youth being thrown in there into that League Cup environment. He looked physically the part. And going back to they obviously lost the game, but I don't think he was really culpable for any of the goals. There was one or two confident catches. I remember Daniel saying about him prior to the game, 3 or 4 days before, that it wouldn't faze him in terms of his composure and his mentality. And they clearly do feel a lot about him, because they've allowed one or two of the other younger keepers out the building, but they've kept him a bit closer to the first team. That to me would be a fairly good sign, in the same way that the Adam Eaders previously, Josh Martin, now Barley Mumba, they haven't been allowed out the door. They are viewed as a bit closer to the first team maybe than some of their contemporaries or some of their peers in the development setup. I just think it's a big ask, because he is such a young man. He is so inexperienced. one thing, and really they didn't have a lot of other option because McGovern and Krul were both away internationally for that Luton League Cup tie. It really was needs must. I think tomorrow, coming off the back of a defeat, I think that would be a big call, as I say, against a team and the Tony Pulis, who will be quite obnoxious in a nice way, in terms of, they will be very hard, very resolute, very streetwise. I'm sure based on what the work he did at Stoke, they'll be the land of the giants as well. So I'm not sure that's the right environment to throw a very young keeper into, but it's a fair point, because so much of how Norwich do play is building from the back on the floor. Tim Krul, composed, passing it out to centre backs, splitting the sort of press and getting round sides that way. Michael McGovern, by common consent, is nowhere near as comfortable with the ball at his feet. And you look at the build-up. Yes, we can debate about the incident that led to Grant Hanley handling the ball for the penalty, but that all came about because Michael McGovern has took the ball on his right, halfway in the middle of his 6-yard box, and is trying to pass out to the left back, overhit the pass, and Luton have recycled the ball. So I'm not sure if that had been Tim Krul, would have been in quite such a calamitous situation. So it is what it is. He was asked about McGovern today, actually, now I think about it, Daniel, and about his lack of sort of comfort on the ball. And, Daniel kind of just sort of brushed it off, I felt, and talked about, well, in the way that Poeta is a different option to Todd Cantwell in the left-hand side. McGovern is not the same type of keeper as Tim Krul, which I think we all know. But ultimately, if you're asking him to do something he's not very comfortable with, which is build the play with the ball at his feet, you run the risk. And unfortunately, they were caught out midweek. So, yeah, that's why we don't need a repeat of that, because I think then the questions will grow. If Tim Krul is out for another 10 days, 2 weeks, I think, a poor performance from Michael McGovern tomorrow, and we'll be talking about Dan Barden again. But I think after the back of one ropey-ish performance at Luton, but by no means was he culpable alone. The lads in front of him didn't really help him out, did they, that night in defensive situation? So I think I'd rather look at the more collective defensive effort at Kenilworth Road rather than focus specifically on Michael McGovern. But yeah, there's no doubt about it. They do feel Daniel Barden could be a very good keeper in the making, and possibly too soon, as it is for Omatoye and Bamadelli. But needs must. Tyree's got his debut the other night. They think a lot of Bamadelli, the young centre back, Republic of Ireland youth international. But Daniel said prior to the Luton game, it's too early for these guys. They're not ready yet, but needs must, and at least they're now getting a little bit of a taste of what it's all about, being around the first team environment. So I think really Barden's probably in the same category at the minute.
Yeah, I think if Tim Krul and Michael McGovern are both fit going into January, they would certainly be open to potentially a loan for Dan Barden, given they've got John McCracken back in the 23s as well. So it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on. Matt Gregory, can Norwich recall Sam McCallum? They can in January. Will they? Probably not. I think it's an area that Daniel Farquhar identified at the back end of the last window as saying that they would need to do some business in January. So I think it's probably more likely that they'll delve into the market. And then Mark Hilton has said, why not Rob Nizzet for left back? It's his position. Tony Pulis will have Wednesday set up to attack Sorensen. On him, I think I said this last week, but I spoke to someone, and with him, I think it's a maturity issue more than a technical issue, so to speak. So I think he's not quite in the where they'd like him to be in terms of mentality. Edward Ivans has said Grant Hanley was pushed. Manchester City had a player sent off for touching an official. Surely it's against the rules to touch an official. I know that Sergio Aguero incident was on Norwich City's mind actually when they made this complaint. If there's anything else, then we'll move on to, we've spoken about referees. We'll move on to everyone's second favourite topic, which is Brexit. And we're not going to get into the politics of it, but certainly in terms of how it's going to affect Norwich and how it's going to affect football from January, it's a very interesting new set of regulations that Norwich are going to have to contend with, particularly given how they like to recruit and they like to shop abroad. We know that. How it's going to change the market may hinder their ability to bring players in from abroad.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we don't need to get, I'd advise people who did a piece, there's a piece upon the Pink, and we don't really want to go down that rabbit hole right now because it's to turn into a very, very long podcast / Facebook Live about the actual nuances of what the regulations are. But essentially, in a nutshell, from January the 1st onwards, recruiting players from EU countries is going to be different. There's going to be different administrative and paper trails, and possibly it's going to be tougher to get players from the EU. Now, the upside of that is, and I think this is where Daniel, when I asked him about it earlier today, where his head is at, is that might be the case in terms of the EU markets, but there's other markets now, whereas before it would have been very difficult. You'd be trying to get the work permit scenario, similar to where they are with Sebastian Soto at the minute. South America, Daniel referenced, I know for a fact they've got scouts in South America now and have had for over 12 months. That is an area they're looking at with a view now potentially post January the 1st to make it a bit easier to bring players in. And also, I thought interestingly, Daniel was talking about, he didn't reference any particular countries in South America, but the finances there in terms of getting players from top leagues in those countries would be far cheaper to do that than going to a top tier in Germany, Spain, France, Italy. So it feels like Norwich have put a lot of groundwork in this area, and I think they're pretty relaxed about it. It might make it harder in certain aspects of what they want to do. I think there's a cap now on how many under 21s they could bring in any given season from overseas. So I think it's more of a nuanced thing for Norwich. I don't think there's going to be a massive radical overhaul in their transfer strategy. Maybe even more of a focus. And to be fair, again, probably preempted it towards the domestic market. We talked about Sam McCallum. He came in last January. In the summer, they went for Jordan Hugill. They brought in Ben Gibson, loan with a view to a permanent deal. There was a clear pivot there towards the domestic market, and that might be the way to go, because obviously if it's a lot harder to bring players in from EU territories, then there's a higher premium on the domestic market. But as always, as Daniel made it quite clear again today, a self-funded club trying to do domestic business all the time, very difficult, because the price tags associated with domestic players are high already relative to similar sort of quality on the continent. That's only going to increase. There's only going to be a higher premium on domestic players. So hence why they're obviously looking into maybe more untapped markets further afield. One other thing I would say on it is that the players who are already here from EU territories, they can apply and will have applied already. Norwich will have already done that for settled status, which basically means if they're already here now, there's no fears that, Marco Stiepermann, for example, Christoph Zimmermann, they would have to depart because the rules and regs are changing. That isn't going to be the case. There's nothing retrospective about that. All the players are already here. As long as they've filled in this settled status paperwork, which they will have done, they're all fine. And actually, those players now, if they're allowed to stay here and have that status, there might be a premium on those players. So basically the lads who've already come in from EU countries moving forward, we saw in the summer just gone, the likes of Tribal, Lighton and Dermich. Okay, 2 or 3 of those are still in the building, but those 3 are deemed surplus to Norwich's needs, but they could be then attractive to other clubs in the UK. So, there's a lot to work through. Daniel says it's quite a complicated scenario, and it clearly looks like that from the outside looking in, but ultimately, I don't see it dramatically altering what Norwich do. And if it does in any regard, it'll be markets like South America where they will try and tap into, dare I say it, another Emi Buendia or 2 would be nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Spot on about the settled status. I think that's going to play a big part in the market, and South America as well. And that's a key reason with Sebastian Soto, as you said there, why he's out on loan at the moment, and they're trying to get him a work permit. Maybe they're hoping that these rules post Brexit will be a bit more favourable to him getting that. So it's going to change the dynamic, and we'll hear from Daniel on it in a moment. It's really interesting, actually, and he said today, didn't he, that actually the more successful they become, the easier these rules are to adapt to. And I was told that under these current rules they wouldn't have been able to sign Timu Pukki. So that is kind of what they have to contend with at the moment. So we'll see how it impacts them. Here's what Daniel Farke had to say on the new regulations coming in from January. If you're a bit confused by what we said, as Paddy said, there's a piece on our website that explains all the regulations in detail. They can't sign players under 18 from abroad. So players like Rob Nizzet, who came when they were 17 from Anderlecht, that's a deal that can no longer happen. They can only bring in 3 under 21 players. I think it's per season, and then 6 foreign players per season. So that does shift how they do business a little bit. Here's what Daniel Farke had to say on it at his press conference earlier today.
To be honest, our first view was always on the homegrown market because it's the easiest way and the easiest choice. Yeah, but sometimes also the most expensive choice. So meanwhile, we're in a much better situation. I think we can afford right now also to go a bit more aggressive on this homegrown market. But one of our strategies will always be to be pretty much aware what happens abroad. So the new rules are, I would label them quite complicated. It also opens a bit, for example, a bit more because of the rules, the South American market in comparison to some other countries in Europe. So you'll have also to change a bit your concentration of your scouting, where how you want to scout. But on the other hand, it's also like we improve and hopefully step by step as a club. And anyhow, then we also don't have to have a deeper look, more like in the second and the third tier of some countries. No, we can also go for the first tier. So because we improve in our level of quality that we can sign, and also hopefully also in terms of the money that we can spend. So the more successful we are as a club, the easier it is also to adapt to this new rules. But it definitely has an impact, and we have to be smart also in our decisions on which countries we will concentrate from now on. That's also no doubt. Yes.
There you go, Daniel Farker on the Brexit regulations that are going to affect Norwich City and the way they recruit in transfer windows. Pad, let's just take a brief look ahead to tomorrow's game. We'll park Brexit. I think we'll leave that for the time being. Sheffield Wednesday, Tony Pulis. We kind of know what we're going to expect from a Tony Pulis side. The question is, how do Norwich City deal with it, and how important is it that Norwich City get in front? As Tony's flashed up a graphic there, you can see he's had 4 games in charge. He's drawn the last 3. I think they've either been 0-0 or 1-1. It's crucial that Norwich City get ahead tomorrow, isn't it, in terms of the way Sheffield Wednesday will approach the game?
That is some start there. 18 goals for Sheffield Wednesday. So are we saying they've scored 8 goals?
Yes.
8 goals?
Yeah, this is it. And they scored only their second in open play in their last game against Reading, and their first came on the opening day of the season. So in terms of open play, not
2
particularly
goals all season.
Yeah.
That says it all, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, to be drawing the last 3 games at it does underline the Pulis effect is already starting to take hold, and that is that they will be unbelievably disciplined, well organised, and quite physical, no doubt. You know, you only have to sort of cross-ref with his period at Stoke. And I think, set pieces are going to be key again, because you guarantee Tony Pulis will be licking his chops when he saw the video from Luton and how vulnerable Norwich were. McGovern, don't think that's his MO, is it? Coming and dominating his area. And Norwich conceded 1 or 2 goals too many in the last 2 or 3 games. Stoke away, they were poor on a set piece, and the other night. So Pulis might fancy it, because he knows if he can keep Norwich quiet at the other end, they will get an opportunity inevitably, and there is a vulnerability there on recent evidence from Norwich. So I think it is underlying for me once again that in what could be a tight game, the fans could have a big role to play, but ultimately, you just hope, with Pookie back in the mix, with Buendia, that they will have a bit more of a sharper edge to them. And although it might be tougher to create, it certainly won't be I wouldn't expect in the same volume of chances as we've seen in a lot of games, but they should be able to create enough, you think, with those type of players in the side. And then if they do, and Pookie can carry on where he left off, there might be something there for them. But I just think it's not going to be a particularly good game to watch. It's going to be quite an arm wrestle, and that'll suit Pulis down to the ground, because he knows ultimately if he came here and was expansive and opened up the game, there's only going to be one winner, because Norwich in that type of game are far better pound for pound, individually, collectively. So it's in his interests and Sheffield Wednesday's interest to make it quite a tough watch in terms of the spectacle. And if they do that, I'm sure he will feel that they've got enough grit and determination about them to get something. And that's the only sort of concern I do have, is that, again, if it is a tight game, 60, 65 on the clock, he turns around, Daniel, what has he got in terms of game-changing elements? If Pookie's starting, you're probably looking at Mario Vrancic, maybe if Stiepermann comes out the side, maybe him, but you wouldn't exactly be overly confident that Norwich have enough resource to change the game if they needed to. So massive onus on the lads who start the game, as it was last week against Coventry. You can see a very similar game, very tight game, and Norwich have managed to find a way up until midweek. So let's hope that continues again, because as Daniel said rightly today, you never want to get used to losing games, even though you've got all these injuries. There should be a lot of disappointment and frustration after midweek, and you like to feel that they could channel that tomorrow in terms of getting a result against quite an obdurate opponent, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hear your score predictions now. If you're watching, see St John Cooper has gone with a 0-0, which is probably a safe bet. And I know after this broadcast has finished, I'm going to be sort of doing some neck stretches just in preparation for tomorrow, just in case we're doing that all afternoon. But let's hope not. It's a bit Beauty and the Beast, isn't it? So it will be interesting. Tony Pulis, though, for all of his flaws and despite the sort of different philosophies that him and Daniel Farke has, there was a lot of common respect between the pair. Some nice quotes on our website from Tony Pulis today about Daniel.
There was, yeah, and feelings mutual, given what Daniel said this afternoon in regard to Tony Pulis. Very similar to what we had with Neil Warnock not all that long ago. I think Daniel respects hugely these coaches who've had such longevity in the game, right at the sharp end as well in English football, and he as the question was put to him today, it probably is a contrast in styles as it was when he played Middlesbrough and Warnock. But I don't think Daniel particularly is. He sees it that way. He just sees it as somebody, given who knows how tough that job is, that looks at somebody who's been doing it for decades and decades with relative success. But in both cases, Warnock had 8 promotions on his CV in English football, unrivaled. Pulis, what he did at Stoke, whether you like the brand of football or not, to establish them in the Premier League as he did, year after year after year. I think they were in there for a decade or so before he moved on, and got to the FA Cup final, got into Europe off the back of that. Did a fantastic job there, and it's nice to see that. Yeah, it's nice to see that there is that mutual respect between the both. But ultimately, as Daniel said, the fire still burns. Anybody who watches Tony Pulis in a technical area, the fire still burns. He's a passionate man, and he's obviously trying to instill those attributes into the Sheffield Wednesday team. And ultimately, he's been recruited there to get them up and back to where they certainly would feel they belong. A massive club, massive fan base in the doldrums for too long. It's not going to happen this season. Clearly, they had too much ground to make up with the points deduction when they started. But I guess it's all about solidifying in the Championship this season and then pushing on and competing next season. So he's already starting to put the building blocks in place, and it's all, as I say, all set up for a lot of mutual respect on the touchline. Maybe not so much on the pitch, because I'm sure Pulis will be very keen to sort of noise Norwich up and get in their faces and make life uncomfortable for them, and Daniel knows full well that's going to happen. So let's see what tomorrow brings.
Yeah, absolutely. Bournemouth are 2-0 up against Barnsley, nearly half time. That will put them top of the table before, obviously, Norwich City play tomorrow. I see a few of your score predictions. James Hilton said hopefully we won't bring on Christoph Zimmermann if we go 1-0 down again. Edward Ivans has said 1-0 City. Dubai Canary City to bounce back with a 3-2 win. And David has said a 2-1 win to Norwich as well. We're going to round off. But before we do, we thought we'd give you a little bit of an exclusive look at a chat with that I've had with a former Norwich City player. It's the first time he's spoken about Norwich. He told me since he's left. I think he was very reflective. Here's a snippet of what happened when I caught up with Yannick Wildschut.
People only see what's happening on the pitch. They don't really see what's happening around it. I remember just after the game, a little bit, like a couple of weeks after the game, my wife had some problems with the pregnancy, and there was like a time where I had like long days, didn't sleep at night because I have to take care of the wife, of the kid, and everything else. So when I went to training, I was tired and I couldn't show what I really was about. And when there was times to like kick on and say like, yes, I couldn't play as I wanted, because there was too many things really like, holding me back a little bit. And I think that's also a part what I think what cost me in my Norwich career, where the moments that I got the opportunity to show it and that I just couldn't provide because of the things what happened outside of football, and just not being good enough to show it at the time. So yes, it is a start-stop, but it's like a combination of a lot of things. I wouldn't just put it like that I would play and then I wouldn't play, but it didn't help.
There you go. The full chat will be out on Sunday. It's very good. He's very reflective, actually, on his Norwich City career. Some brutal honesty in there as well. Maybe not particularly memorable for his performances on the pitch beyond that Sheffield United game, but a really nice bloke now playing in Israel as well. Pad, before we round off, Yannick Vilska, any sort of lasting memories on dealing with him at all?
Not really, no. There's some unfavourable.
Wasn't here long enough, was he?
No, that was good. That looked good stuff, mate. I look forward to that. No, I won't give away the identity of certain individuals, but let's just say when regime change happened at Norwich, Wiltshire, sadly, that deadline day deal, when he got fetched in for considerable amount of money under Alec Neil, I think that was viewed by the new regime as maybe all that was wrong in the end of that period when it went on such a downward spiral on and off the pitch. And that's a bit unfair on the lad. And from what he's saying there, as he says, we only see them 90 minutes, 45, whatever minutes they get on the pitch on a Saturday, Tuesday. There's a whole range of other factors, and that's why it looks quite a good interview. That, but I don't think we'll remember him too much in terms of his Norwich career. But good luck to him if he's enjoying his football over there and playing regularly. That's. I mean, he had some terrible injuries, didn't he? Where did he go on from Norwich? And was it a bad knee injury?
He went to Cardiff on loan, didn't he? And then he went to Bolton, and obviously the struggles of that, and then obviously he's now out in Israel. So he's very, very honest on his Norwich City career. It's a good watch. Video is out on Sunday. We've got some pieces or a piece on our website tomorrow morning that which will be worth checking out from him. There we go, Pad. I think we're just about there. We'll see you. We'll both be at Carrow Road tomorrow, 2 p.m. Team News, you good people know by now, will be across all the platforms as the Team News drops. We'll be interested. Norwich City host Sheffield Wednesday. Fans will be back. That will be great. Looking forward to it. Hope you're all staying safe and well, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Thanks for watching.